I'm a localish. I mean, like I've been here so long. I definitely feel like I'm more local to this area now in Virginia than I was like from South Carolina.
Yeah,
I have less ownership to that now.
it doesn't take
So
long. Like I noticed, like we live in Las Vegas now, but we've lived here like 5 years, and every time like I go back home for like holidays and things like that, see family. It's
yeah,
always it does feel like, oh yeah, I don't live here anymore. Like it's like everything has
yeah.
changed. The stores, the shops, everything is different. I'm more like I'm local over in this place now, and not where I grew up and spent the first 20 years of my life. Yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy, heavy, heavy.
Bored.
I may say male is entirely hostile. No! Dinner.
Resources.
Life, friends, is boring. We must not say so.
This is Andrew Whitstadt, and you were listening to Heavy Board, and we're recording this on January 25th, 2025. My guest today is Becky Bell. Becky is a former HR director, working as an administrator for over a decade. She's a teacher, and that includes every subject, listeners, as Becky specializes in homeschooling, running her own, and helping others set up their own. And Becky is also a writer. She just put out her debut children's book this past fall, The Gnomes of Fibberton, a classic children's story in the vein of Aesop's fables, and already getting acclaim and awards, including the Pencraft Book Award in 2024, and gaining an honorable mention at the Paris Book Festival, among many others. Becky owns and operates her own press, writes a regular blog, and mothers 3 children on a daily basis. And Becky is also a woman of faith, and she isn't afraid to talk about it openly and honestly, listeners. And it's a pleasure to welcome her onto Heavy Board today. Becky, thank you so much for coming on Heavy Board.
Oh, thank you for having me. I am excited to be here today.
Of course, of course. We like to start this off with the same question we ask every writer that comes on, really every guest that comes on here. What was your childhood like? Where did you grow up? What did your parents do? We want to know kind of how these early years started to form you, and how we work our way up to the writing the books and all that.
Okay. So, about my childhood, I am the baby of 6 children. So my mom and dad had older sister first, and then they had boy, 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 boy. And then they finally had me, little girl. Their pride, my mother's pride and joy, particularly. But my mom, she was a stay-at-home mom until I was probably like when I went to school in kindergarten, like 5 or 6 years old. And then she started working at different mortgage companies and stuff like that. She did office, clerical stuff. And my father worked on computers back when, computers were brand new. So he was an Apple guy. He always used to say that he was an Apple guy. And what else? So that was my brief overview of my, just the family dynamic, I guess. They lived in Florida before I was born. They also lived in New Hampshire where I was born. And I moved when I was 2 to South Carolina with my family until I was 20 years old. So I grew up in South Carolina. I don't think I got a really thick accent from it, but that's where I grew. I still say y'all.
Yeah,
And
the Southern.
I do say y'all, and I won't hold it back. And I do let ain't slip out once in a while, but I know it's so grammatically incorrect. But I almost do it as like a showing my Southern on purpose kind of thing.
Where in South Carolina?
I grew up in the Midlands around Columbia, just south of Columbia in a city called Lexington,
Okay.
which is a pretty big city there. Now it's gotten bigger. But I lived in like a little town next to Lexington, and I would
Right.
always just say I'm from Lexington.
Yeah.
Right.
It gets
I
too
was really from
complicated
Gilbert.
otherwise. Yeah.
Yeah. I was from the little town of Gilbert, South Carolina. Um, so that's pretty much, I don't know. What else could I say about
What
my
what
childhood?
did you move around because of your father's work? Usually, or
No. So he worked there. He worked at the South Carolina State newspaper and worked on the computers there. Before I was born, since I'm the baby of six, like there's like a whole history of the family before I even came to being, right? They were in Florida for like 10 years, and then they were in New Hampshire, and then I was born, and then grew up in South Carolina. So I had a different upbringing almost than like my oldest sibling. My sister claims to be more of like, from Boston because
yeah,
she grew up in New Hampshire, and I was, so we have very different. It's interesting to see the dynamic from kid to kid because we're 15 years apart.
yeah. I was going to ask, yeah, how much older is the oldest from you? Yeah.
Yeah, she was born in 70, and I was born in 84.
Okay. Yeah.
So we're a few years apart, and then all the boys in the middle. So I was a tomboy because I would follow my brothers around all the time and always try to play with my brothers and wanted to be just like my brothers. But then as I got older, as I hit my teen years, I was a lot, I became more feminine and kind of distanced myself from my brothers a lot. But yeah, and then my faith does play a huge role. I grew up as a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And I am still a member to this day. So that's definitely a huge part of my life. I go to church every Sunday. So that's very big to me.
Yeah.
Christ plays a very big, important part of my life.
Yeah, that's interesting. I was going to ask to what faith or what denomination, of like Christianity. Because again, I'm interested in that. That's and I live in Nevada, so I'm right near Utah, and there's a lot of LDS, all over the
Yeah.
place, and all over the place here. A lot of churches and a lot of missions and things like that. And yeah, so it's
Yeah,
always fascinating.
I'm an East Coaster, right? So I meet the fellow members of my church that come from the West, and I always like will point that out to them. That did play a role in my upbringing too, because it's very different growing up on the West Coast, a member of the church, versus growing up on the East Coast, because there's a lot less members out here,
Right.
and there's a lot of bigotry too, and especially in the South. I dealt with a lot of like not nice things being said to me when I was a kid.
Were most of you like growing up in South Carolina? Were most of people were they Episcopalian or what were they down there in South Carolina? I'm not as familiar with
I would say Baptist.
Baptist. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Most people went to a Baptist church and have very strong opinions
Yes.
and pass out pamphlets about other churches and, say not nice things about other churches, which is really sad to me, because I feel like as Christians, like we need to kind of unite and be united in Christ and not like looking at all of our differences. But that's I got that a lot when I was a kid. So
Yeah, that's interesting.
Anyway.
Like I talk about it on this. I grew up in Baltimore, and I didn't realize this until I left. I grew up Catholic, and Baltimore is a very Catholic city. Like I didn't realize that. Like 'cause everybody I knew was just Catholic, right? Like there's and there obviously there's other faiths there. It's a huge city, but and then I moved down to the South for grad school. I lived in Louisiana for a couple years, and everybody there was Baptist or Pentecostal or Episcopal, like something different. No Catholics. It was all Baptists and other kind of the more southern religions. Than I guess Catholicism didn't make its way down there. But
No,
yeah, it's
no.
interesting.
I've always gotten along with the Catholics a lot because members of my church, right, and Catholics, we're kind of like, I don't know, we're on the outs with the other. it's, it's terrible. We're on the outs with the other Christians. They've just put us over there. It's not that we want to be. They're just like, hey, you're not like us, and they like move us to the side. So I've always actually had a lot of Catholic friends, and been like, I live in Front Royal, Virginia, where we have a huge Catholic population
Yeah,
here.
that area. It's
We have
very
Christendom College.
yeah.
So like I have tons of Catholic friends and we get along great, and we share a lot of the same values. I mean, I do with all Christians. They just, I get that vibe from some of them sometimes where they're like, well, you're not the same as us.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate, but because like I said, I think we should find our similarities instead of trying to figure out or point out all our differences,
Yeah. That's interesting too. I guess because Mormon, maybe because it was like the, kind of like the break from like the, another Catholic sect, right? Or another Christian sect, like, people treat it as if it was some type of, it's like the newer thing or whatever, like and people were like, oh, no. Like when Joseph Smith broke away from, but yeah, anyway, yeah, I want to get to all this. Yeah, this is fantastic stuff already, Becky. Yeah. When did reading and writing come into your life here with growing up and like, did that something you did as a young age? That's something you came into later in life? Like when did reading and writing come into your life?
It's funny that we were talking about, I don't usually in any of my podcasts really talk about faith a lot, but I like that we talked about it because it does bring something to my mind that I always with my family, we would read the scriptures.
Okay. Yeah.
We would do it like almost daily. We would try to read the scriptures like a chapter a night. And I always credited that to helping me have a higher vocabulary when I was younger, because there's some pretty complicated words in like the King James version of the Bible.
Right. It wasn't like a children's Bible, right? It was like the real, like poetic,
right.
The poetry on the lines.
Yeah. And likewise, the Book of Mormon, it reads pretty much just like the King James version. It's written just like that. It sounds like it. So I credited my ability to read a little better when I was little and have a higher vocabulary to that I read scriptures quite frequently. And I also, I mean, I loved books when I was little. I would go into my room with a good book and just read it over and over again. And I'd go through different phases with different types of books, from like, I remember my grandma sending me Mother Goose books.
Right.
When I was like really little, and I would kind of obsessively go through those poems and read them. And then I started reading, as I got older, Judy Blume books. Of course, I mean, I was a young girl, and like when I was like 8, 9, 10, like I obsessed over Are You There, God? It's Me, Margaret for a year or two. And then I found my mom had the complete works of Edgar Allan Poe.
Yes.
And I became really obsessed with that when I was a teenager. And I would like read it over and over and over and over. And I memorized several of the poems in there, actually. Israfel was like my favorite poem. If you've ever read it, it's the best. But I memorized it when I was young. And Annabelle Lee.
Yeah.
But and then I read like I really got into, I'm showing my age because I feel like this lines up. Anne Rice was really big for me when I was an older teenager, and I read a lot of the Vampire Chronicles and stuff. And so that's my evolution in reading, and how I've always really enjoyed reading a good book.
Yeah, absolutely. So. It's I mean, that's so important too. And I love that. I mean, you say the age, I mean, like you're a millennial. Yeah. We love millennials in this podcast mainly because I am, but I think it's, every time you hear about millennials, it's always some type of, well, maybe not so much anymore. They've moved on to Gen Z now, and like kind of articles and stuff like, oh, that they're terrible, right? Like the younger, because when we growing up, like we were the youngest generation until Gen Z came along, and all the articles about how awful we were, or whatever, millennials were awful and selfish.
It was hard for a while. It was really hard.
Yeah.
And being the youngest in my family. So like I'm the only one that's technically a millennial, and I'm like, this is ridiculous.
Right.
Like I grew up with all Gen X family, so I don't like. I had an Atari and a Pong game machine in my house when I was a kid. I didn't have a phone until I bought one when I was 20. So I always thought it was weird that I was lumped into the millennial crowd. But it's all divisive anyway, right? It's all a means of trying to kind of keep us feeling like we're all different than each other and dividing us.
Yeah. That's
so
Kurt Vonnegut has a great line where he just said, "There's only two generations: the living and the dead." That's we're all part of the living generation. But I like that you said the Bible. We're like, and this is something that I stress, and I stress it to because we love the great books and stuff on this podcast, and the literary canon is big. Sometimes gets me into trouble when I defend the literary canon and things like that on this podcast, but it's just. Like that's something like I have a daughter now and she's 4.5 months at this point. So and like one of the things that I really emphasize.
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Is I really want to make sure that she knows the Bible stories and things, and I want that because if you understand that, you like the world of Western literature just opens up to you, like all of the allegory, all of the symbolism, like is open to you. And I remember being in school, and I went to Catholic schools growing up, like in Baltimore there, like and just even kids, like students that were in class with me, like they wouldn't pick out these little allegories and these things where to me it was already there. Like I just saw it right away. Because I'm like, oh, that's the story. It's like the story of Loaves and Fishes, or oh, it's like this. It's Jonah. Like the kind of the big, huge foundations. It's the huge foundation of not just Western civilization, but like all of the literature too, that came from it. So I love that. And then I only knew it from like a children's Bible. I was not reading like the verse, but if you were reading the verse and like the poetry and like the the rhyme scheme and everything that was already built into it, I mean, that just elevates your reading comprehension to a level beyond your peers in a way that you can notice when you sit in classrooms, basically. But yeah, the next question I always like to ask too, and you kind of went into this, is what are your go-to writers? You kind of started to evolutionize, your evolution of reading and writing, kind of going from, children's books to kind of the young adult to kind of the vampire romances to.
Yeah.
What are your go-to writers? Who are your favorite writers? To give you inspiration or your go-to, all of that. Yeah. And anything goes. Yeah. Whoever.
To this day, I still really, really love Anne Rice.
Yeah.
I love Anne Rice's books, and I even went into like the Witches Chronicles that she did and everything. And Anne Rice was a big motivator for me, because one of the things she did that I loved was she combined history with these like fictional tales. So if you're reading like The Vampire Lestat, it actually has like different historical, like along the timeline of different real events that happened. And I love that because I'm a big history buff too, which another set of books that I really do love. I'm such a dork.
Yeah.
I apologize. I like the Anglo-Saxon Chronicles.
I've never.
Have you?
No. What is that?
They are okay. So they're super dry, and they're hard to read. Probably a little like the Bible, but even more boring, because they are just like factual. Like this happened here. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicles in particular talk about the formation of England.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And the
sense.
Kingdoms, right? It becoming the United Kingdom. Right. And just like Alfred becoming like that first king that united England. And it could be, I think, a lot of, like, I had to muscle through a lot of the beginnings of it. But I wanted to get to, I love the facts so much. And I love documentaries and stuff, historical documentaries. And I've watched them since I was a kid. but I like reading the historical documents because you actually get like the real facts. Because historical documentaries, there's a whole bunch of, we think this happened
Right.
and we
Yeah.
think that was like this and we think their relationship was this way. It's like, but you're gathering that from a historical document. I want to read the document and find out what really happened. So those actually, in an odd way, kind of drive me. I'm kind of obsessed with history and all things older, which is probably why I wrote a book that is very like Grimm's fairy tale.
Yeah. Yeah.
For a children's book, it's off the beaten path. You're not going to find a lot of children's books like mine on the shelf that are like kind of like a Grimm's fairy tale or Aesop's fable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I literally have a Grimm's little hardbound on the shelf here that I keep right there, and it's right next to it's next to like all the other stuff. And I just recently I bought, we didn't have it, so I bought like I said my daughter's only 4.5 months, so she's not quite understanding those types of things, but it doesn't stop me from reading them to her. But like, just bought like a nice illustrated, hardcover edition of Aesop's Fables for her for that, because I was like, we didn't own it. And I was like, yeah, she needs to know these. But yeah, I mean, that's fantastic. And I think there is, I mean, it's something almost magical. People get crazy about that word, whatever, but it's something, there's something to them. Like there's something to those kinds of, Peter Rabbit, even like these kinds of the morality tales, the behavior tales kind of, I don't know. I mean, there is, I didn't plan on asking you this, but we're talking about it. Do you think that there is something missing like that? Like, do you think that like a lot of children's books right now are missing that kind of magical morality kind of?
Oh yeah.
Because I've been getting into some of them too. Yeah, recently. And again, my daughter's a little too young to be like obsessed and reading a book every night, with the same book every night. I know that's coming, but yeah. What do you think of that? What?
So I would say consequences in general are largely absent in modern kids literature. The original Grimm's or Aesop's Fables, they can be a little harsh, hard for children to grasp, right? I wanted my book to be more in line with classic literature, but not as extreme. So I needed relatable, harsh consequences for today's kids. Like, there's no desserts in Fibberton. If you get carried away to Fibberton, there's no desserts there. The toys are broken. You have only vegetables to eat. You have to do chores all day that all the kids lied and said they did, but never did.
Right.
Things that are relatable to kids that I'm trying to present like in this humorous way, right? By having the little hidden gnomes spying on them to count their fibs, right? And I think kids love the ideas of gnomes hiding all around and sneaking about. It's fun. It provokes their imaginations. The reason I wrote the book down was because I would tell the story to kids. I came up with the idea like 10 years ago.
Okay.
When I was telling it to a niece because she was lying, and I just told her, there's little gnomes and they're listening to you and they're counting your fibs, and if you tell too many, they're going to carry you to Fibberton. And anyway, so through the years, I've told it to different children, and I've seen the kids like they just love the story, and they start like playing games based on little gnomes spying on them, and then they'll also like start asking questions about what is a lie and what is kind of like towing the line. There's different kinds of lies, right? There's like a bold faced lie. There's tall tales, right? Where someone says, "Oh, I got a child could say like I was abducted by aliens." A tall tale, right? Versus like deception, where you're just like acting like you don't know what's going on. That's a form of a lie, right? So right. I think that's why I wrote the book down, because I thought it was important to open up the conversation when kids are really young, because they really do lie when they're super young and they know they're lying. Like when they're like, my experience in having kids, I've got 3 under the age of 8 now. As soon as like 2 years old, you'll say, "Did you go poopy in your diaper?" And they'll be like, "No."
Right.
Like right away, they're lying at only 1 or 2 years old because they don't want to be slowed down and have their diaper changed.
Right.
So I think they can understand it as early as that. So I thought, why not introduce it to them when they're that young, so that as they get older, they have a foundation, a real foundation. What's a lie? What's not a lie? And also teaching them like integrity too. Like you think about, like I said, the levels of what a lie is, for deception versus bold-faced lying, right?
And the motivation too, like you're getting into the
Yeah.
motivation in terms of, are you telling a white lie because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, about their haircut or
Right.
something, or are you trying to deceive people to get away with something, like these kind of, because it's somewhat complicated in that regard when you're talking about these kind of intricacies, at least, obviously. But yeah, that's fair. I want to get into this, about lying and the right and wrong and all of that too. Yeah, absolutely. You wrote an interesting blog post recently, and it was around Christmas, where you started talking about starting traditions and kind of the importance of family traditions, and I'm a big believer in those. I like, family traditions and even larger traditions, like, kind of national traditions, even as like a country, or like you said, in your church or anything like that. There's kind of, I wanted to ask you, why are family traditions important, and why do you encourage people to start them?
Ooh, they're so important to get your family unit to be more cohesive. I am a big believer. I mean, as part of my faith, I'm a big believer in the family and the family unit, and I think that there is a big attack on families and family units, and there's a lot of pressure to break up family units in today's day and age. A lot. So doing traditions together is one of those bonding things. Like one of the things we do is, like, every Monday night, our church has sponsored this since I was little. We do a family home evening activity where we, for 30 minutes to an hour, come together and try to, it depends on the kids' ages, right? What you can do. But we could play a board game. We could get together, just read them a story and sing some songs, or something where we're really just focusing on each other for that 30 minutes to hour or time frame.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. Even something as simple as like growing up, we always had like a Friday movie night or something,
Yeah,
and like my mom
exactly.
would theme the food for dinner around the movie or something, like she would make that effort, and it's one of my greatest memories as a child, and maybe why I love movies and blah blah blah. But like, I love that, especially like when I think about traditions more, and this is a theme on the podcast too. Regular listeners know this. I'm obsessed with Christmas. And kind of
I love Christmas too.
Yeah, and I think it has to do with how we were raised, in terms of my parents made it a big deal, especially my mother. She made it a big deal, made it special, with these little traditions, like trimming the tree was a big kind of tradition, and we'd put on the Christmas music. Back in those days, you millennials, it was a boombox, maybe a CD or a cassette in the boombox. Right. Or maybe we weren't allowed to touch my dad's big home stereo when we were little, but when we were older, we could use that, and like, and again, now you don't even need a home stereo. Nobody owns one. Like, but yeah, pulling out each ornament, like each ornament has a story. Like my parents, the ones that they collected before we were born, the ones that they've collected since, I had two siblings. I'm the middle child, and we each had ornaments for, times in our life. I think all of that is, and I think you're right. There's, if it's not an outright attack, it's a belittling. Oh, that's not important, or oh, we don't need to worry about that. And then I'm speaking just broadly culture, like you were saying, kind of like, oh, yeah, it's not important. You can just come and go in your families. You can cut out family members and stuff. And it's just like, you're severely underestimating what this is actually. Like, it's actually hugely important. But I was just fascinated when you saw that blog post you wrote about, like encouraging others to start these kind of traditions. And Christmas is a great time, or holidays, or even, like summer vacations or something, a trip to the beach, like these kind of traditions. I mean, what else is life for, right? I mean, it's like a kind of like those like little things. So I was just, I love hearing that about starting traditions and keeping them, and however you start them around listeners too. Like you hear Becky talking about it, like kind of you can do it around your faith, do it around your family, you can do it around these holidays, you could do it around something not even close to that. Like you could do it around anything, like I don't know, like your favorite film or TV show or something. Like you could really start traditions with that. It's
Yeah.
and yeah, and I think even larger culturally, right? Like kind of like American traditions. Like people are like disregarding those or denigrating those. They say, "Oh, they're not important." I'm like, no. Like these stories that we tell ourselves, these traditions that we would do every year, very important to have fireworks on the 4th of July, actually. Like very important to have fireworks on New Year's and like all of that kind of stuff. Like, and it isn't just because it's some fun thing to do. It actually is something that not everybody obviously, but a lot of people, most people look forward to. And if you don't see that, it feels like something's missing, you know? But sorry, I interrupted you.
No, it gives us confidence, right?
Yes. Yeah.
To have those traditions and do those things together. It brings us together. It bonds us. And then as we bond, we also become more confident. So that's why it's especially important to do that with kids and a family so they can have a good self-confidence as they're growing up, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And this brings us to a great thing too. We were talking about lying already, but I wanted to add honesty. Like it's a theme in the book. And it's something that this podcast and I am very interested in, you know, like we're very interested in the kind of honesty and all that it entails too, you know. What is honesty to you? You know, why is it important? Yeah. And again, no definitive answers, just your thoughts. Yeah. What do you think of it?
Why is honesty so important? I think that this book and honesty in general is so important because it leads to a happier, healthier person. If you're honest, if you have integrity, and you have that core value that you are, how do I word that? That I feel like people lie when they don't really have a good self-worth. Yeah. When they don't feel very, you know, that's when you lie. You make things up because you don't feel very, very good about the truth, about, you know. So what honesty means to me is really, I feel like this book, I'm going to put it this way, like it's an allegory for it's not just about lying. It's about integrity and about how you can be successful in your life. So everybody, the premise of the story is you're born with a secret number of fibs you can tell. And once you hit that number of fibs or lies, you get carried away to Fibberton, which is, to me, allegorical for life. And it's not just about lies. It's where, like, people make all kinds of bad decisions. You never know which bad decision either, because the number is different for everybody. You don't know which bad decision it's going to be that takes you down that wrong path, and you are stuck somewhere in a really bad situation, right? Sometimes people escape consequences for a lot longer, and it could be like, you know, 160 bad choices down the road that they finally get caught, and then they're stuck on the bad path, right? But I feel like that's what the value of honesty to me. Like that's why honesty is so important, because if you're not honest and if you don't have integrity, it's going to lead you down a bad path and you're going to be unhappy.
Yeah.
I've never really met a lot of people who are very, very happy or at peace with themselves if they're not honest or they don't have integrity.
Yeah, you lose yourself, yeah, in a way. Like you kind of you lose who you are if you're not being honest. And obviously it's probably, I talk about this on the podcast all the time. I think it's probably harder to be honest with yourself than it is to be honest with, you know, in your everyday life or about like behaviors or something like that, where like it's easier to be, at least I find it that maybe it's like, yeah, the kind of Catholic guilt or upbringing and kind of where we're just kind of yeah, like we're like it's hard for me to lie. Like it's very difficult for me, you know, like I find it very difficult to be dishonest with someone. But then, of course, you know, it doesn't mean I can't lie to myself about something I'm doing or whatever, or like a behavior, right? Like there's that. So sure. You do. But, you know, and I like that you mentioned integrity too. And I taught college for about a decade here. And I would always, mostly English 101 and things like that. And I would always assign them this essay from the 90s. It was called The Insufficiency of Honesty. And it was about integrity. So he's like, being honest without integrity makes honesty kind of less valuable, So like if you're being honest to relieve yourself of, and he gives a couple examples, right? Like infidelity or something. Like if you're being honest about that to relieve the guilt that you have, it's almost like it's not with integrity. I don't know. And it's just always, I get interesting answers from the students and things like that. And I think of the phrase that everybody throws around, but, oh, I'm just being honest. It's like, yeah, but you didn't have integrity when you did that. Like you were actually being honest, and it was actually mean. Like it was mean spirited, like to do that.
Right.
It's no integrity to that honesty. It was a selfish reason to be honest.
Right. Yeah. If I have to tell a white lie to make somebody feel better, it's my personal feel. What I just try not to say anything.
Right. Yeah.
Because I'd rather not lie. I mean, I'd rather just say nothing. As my mom always told me, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Right.
Right. So I would try to just, I still, to this day, I try not to say anything if I get in a situation like that where you kind of want to be like, you just want to be massaging to some, you want to like make them feel better.
Yeah.
So, just abstain, and I won't really say anything to kind of save my integrity.
Yeah, and I talk about on this podcast, it's a different type of honesty, but on this podcast all the time when I'm reviewing something or we're going into works and stuff, like I think, what gives value to a podcast like this or why people would listen is because I say like I try to be as honest as possible when I'm reviewing something and then in that regard it's a little different, right? Where I'm just being honest about how I feel about something. And, we're talking about books or something or a style, like it's not a huge consequence to be honest. There's really, nobody's getting hurt. Maybe some people are offended. They don't like when you don't like their favorite author or something, but it's so valuable. Like, I guess I'm trying to get at that's a value that you're giving to somebody when you're just honestly talking about how you felt or what you got out of something, like even a work of art. We don't even have to go as serious as like faith or morality just yet, but I want to get there too with you. Yeah. But, it's just, yeah, I was just fascinated when that was brought up as a theme in the book and you've emphasized it. And I was like, yeah, like being honest, telling lies, and even my my daughter is very young, obviously, but my older nieces and nephews that I've had, they're all, the youngest is 9. But I remember the middle child, when he was like 6 or 7, he discovered that he could lie to adults, kind of thing. And he would kind of have fun with it. So he would make up these very elaborate stories and tell you that it actually happened or something. And I remember when he was doing that to me once, like I was just kind of like, that didn't happen. Like basically like not call him out on it, but just kind of was like, that didn't happen. Like, and he kind of got like bashful, like kind of like, oh, he got caught lying, for something that didn't matter. It was just a story he was telling. It wasn't like lying about behavior, but yeah. And I'm just like, yeah, the kids get emphasized, like what's teaching kids not to do that now. But yeah. And this leads us to, I wanted to talk to you about, the kind of the right versus wrong, this thing like, and I think I'm fascinated by the right versus wrong kind of stuff because I think it's very interesting, kind of philosophical or even spiritual, if we want to go there, thing to think about, like what makes something right or wrong, and I wanted your thoughts on this, is the feeling of right or wrong inherent within us, like in human beings? Like, how do you feel about that in terms of like right versus wrong? Like, is there something within us that knows this instinctively? And again, this is not, we don't need to start citing studies or anything, but just your thoughts. What's Becky's thoughts on?
You're gonna get me in trouble. You're gonna get me in trouble. I have very deep beliefs and feelings on this topic, and on a lot of topics that I try to stay superficial. But I will say I think that there's, and ever since I took ethics when I was at college, I always felt there's objectively a right and a wrong. And now to say, I think most people are born with the objective right and wrong. And you know what's right and wrong, but I think that it gets blurred for them
Yeah.
as you grow and the influences you have around you. So they can change and make you feel like, so my mom was from California, and she was a surfer chick, right? And she was like kind of a little bit of a hippie. So I feel like her and I were just very diametrically opposed. Like I'm very objective and she's like subjective about a lot of things. And well, there's this gray area and maybe, and I was always just like, no, it's right or wrong it's right or wrong to lie to people, right? Like,
Right.
and there are the gray areas of if like, is it okay to tell a white lie here and there? And it's like, maybe just don't say anything is my response to that, right? That all stems back to my belief that things are pretty much objectively right and wrong. I've always been an objectivist, if that is a thing. Ever since I first heard the two phrases in ethics class, I was like, oh, objective. Yes. 100%. That's how I've always kind of felt about things.
Yeah. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, where this gets into like, the endless debate of blank slateism and stuff like that, where like, are we born as blank slates, or are we born with these kind of inherent kind of things and then people are saying, oh, how much of that is culture? How much of that is actually naturally ingrained? And this is why I'm fascinated by the concept, and I wanted your thoughts on it, because I think there's so much of that. Like there is kind of, you feel it, right? Like, and how do you feel something and people are like, oh, you're conditioned to feel it? I'm like, are you conditioned to feel it? Cause I think that there's something, I don't know. You see little kids, right? Like when you're raising little kids and stuff, like there is something, they feel it. Like, and people are like, oh, yeah, that's cause you're raising them in that environment. Maybe, I don't know. And we can't prove it either way so far. So.
I've had my son correct me on different things. Who's 8 years old, where like this may be a result of how I'm raising him, and kudos to me, then maybe I'm doing a great job. We're in the car one time and I get mad because we're at a 4-way stop, and this other car, they cut me off and they went and they almost hit me. And I was like, I said something not nice, probably like they shouldn't be driving or something. And my son, he's 8 years old. He's like, Mommy, maybe they're having a really bad day. And maybe someone was really mean to them earlier today, and now they're just upset and they just cut you off. And I was just like, oh my gosh, he's such a good boy. Like, right, yeah. He's at 8 years old. He says something like, but I think that is probably from the way I'm raising him. But he's always kind of been just a really good boy and really honest with me about things. He the story was really not based on him at all. He's always been a really good boy and he's always been really honest. But maybe it is because of that's kind of hard to say. If it's like I said, the 2-year-old, right? The 2-year-old will dirty their diaper and then be like, no, right away. Did you go poopy? No. Right. They'll say no right away. Inherently, it's just like they know how to lie when they're 1.5, 2 years old, so that they don't get, they don't have to be held down for a diaper change because they can't be slowed down.
Avoiding consequences, even if it's a small consequence, like just having your playtime interrupted for half a minute to get a diaper change.
Right.
Yeah.
But I do think that they're kind of. I think we're all born with a. You can feel if something's right or wrong. Like, you can tell if someone's being hurt a lot of the time, or and you want to, like, my kids will if we see a homeless person, they want to help them. They try to get me to give them something, and they have that kind of desire to help other people. I think it's actually more potent when you're younger.
Right.
And then as you get older, you kind of get more desensitized.
Or even, more cynical to to, oh, that person's probably trying to screw me over, or, like, yeah, like you like,
Or
oh,
like, how did they get there? And are they just going to take whatever I give them and waste it or throw it away, or,
right.
But that's not the point of being charitable anyway. The point of being charitable is that you just give it to them, and whatever they do with it is on them, right?
Yeah, you saying that
But
too, it made me think of the famous David Foster Wallace speech, "This is Water," right? Where he's, and the literary people listening know what I'm talking about. Where it's a very famous speech he gave, pretty much a few years before he ended his own life, and it was just like, he talks about that specifically, right? Like where he just said, oh, somebody cuts you off in traffic and your instinct is to be upset, be angry, be like, oh, I'm the center of the universe and you're in my way. And then the whole point of the thing is to just think about that for a minute. Be like, well, maybe that's not normal, right? Maybe there's something happening there that you don't understand. And of course, it's about, I think, the way to look at something like that, even I think the main message of that is it's being generous, right? Like being generous, not just for everybody around you, but for yourself too. But yeah, I mean, that's, I love that answer. Yeah.
yeah, I'm always happier when I am actually feeling generosity or feeling charity for other people and doing service for
Yeah.
other people in some way.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my go-to. If I'm down, if I'm feeling sad or anything, I usually do pray. And I try to pray and list what I'm thankful for. That's one of my things that always like cheers me up. Even though it makes me cry in the moment, I get happier because I realize I have so much to be thankful for,
Right.
even though I was feeling really sad and bogged down by something. But the other thing to do is always charity and service. Go out and do something for someone else and you will feel better almost instantaneously.
Yeah.
It's pretty awesome.
That, and even small, like just mentally doing it, like giving somebody the benefit of the doubt. Yeah. When they cut you off or something in traffic, like just kind of, you will feel better. You'll be less stressed. Like all
right.
of that. Yeah. Yeah. It's very, even a small thing like that, which can be difficult to do. I understand. Yeah. Like,
yeah.
But I think this gets at the question, another kind of big philosophical question I want to ask you about morality. You go with something, again, it's a big theme in your book, and ethics we mentioned, and I wanted to ask you, to go into why you think those are so important for children's stories, or really any stories. I think like kind of the morality tale has kind of taken a back seat in our current climate or our current kind of culture. And I just wanted to know your opinion on why you think morals and ethics are kind of the morality tale is the classic children's story, why that's so important in story, particularly, children's stories.
Oh, so I would say that so important in children's stories because especially, I mean, I always say that with today's day and age, and you hear that a lot from people, but seriously, with the internet, we have social media, we have apps on our phones, we have, our kids get access to tablets and phones when they're pretty young. And as much as we lock them down, they're going to get access to certain things if we allow them to get on phones and tablets. And it's really important to teach them integrity when they're very young, so that when they're getting access to those things, they're not sneaking and they're not trying to hide things from us. I mean, as a millennial, I remember, and as an early millennial, chatting on AOL, like in the chat rooms.
AIM.
And IM stuff when I was like, 13 or 14. I was like 13 or 14. And my girlfriend and I would sit there and we would like do the chatting in the AOL rooms on dial up,
Oh yeah.
And we were so cool. But we would talk to people that like, we weren't really equipped. These were like grown men. There were grown men talking to us, asking us how old we were and where we were located. And there was no preparation for that. But that's the kind of stuff that even, at least I have that experience now so that I can relate to my kids when they come across it, but even at a younger age for them, Like it could be at 6 or 7 when they're playing Minecraft or something, that someone asks them, where are you located? How old are you? You know?
Right.
And if we instill that integrity in them to not, maybe I'm just a harsh mom, but my kids will even tell me like, oh mom, can we watch this? Like I'll give them the tablet and they'll have like the Amazon Prime app, they'll have Netflix,
Right.
and they'll come over to me and they'll be like, mom, can I watch this show? They won't watch it without my permission. Part of that may also be because they know that I can see the history that they've
Right.
watched.
Yeah.
But so they're taking away some of the credit. But that's why it's so important to, in today's day and age, to teach them integrity and honesty when they're super young, so that when they come to those points, like I did when I was younger, that they make good decisions and don't just trust everybody either.
Right.
And know not to keep secrets. Like when I read this book in libraries, I'll go to libraries and I'll read it. And at the end, I always say, the gnomes of Fibberton are not real. I do tell the kids the gnomes of Fibberton aren't real. But I say it's very important that you are honest with your parents and you are telling them the truth about everything, and you are not keeping secrets from them.
Right.
So that's kind of the message I always try to convey, that if someone's asking you to keep a secret from your parents, you really need to tell your parents.
Right.
Like that's when you especially need to tell your parents. So anyway, that's why I think it's so important in today's climate, though.
It's so interesting too, because I think, there's always the stress on the kind of family unit, and I want to get to family too. That's one of my questions, but there is, when you feel like you can go to your parents with an issue, you're much better. Those people that I've known, just in my own experience, again, I don't have any studies to cite or anything like that, although I'm sure you could find a few that are just, everybody who could do that with their parents are happier, better off. Everyone that I've known now in my mid 30s, and I've just see people kind of settling into their lives here. Trust me, the people that could go to their parents and like when there's a serious, and even if it's a minor issue, that's one thing, and you can go to them, but like that means that you can go to them with the bigger things, like the kind of when you get in trouble or something and you really need help or anything like that. Like,
right.
It's such a weapon again in the world. Like it's such a way to be able to deal with things that you're much better off in life if you've had that, and then can give that to your own children. Yeah, please go on.
I was going to say with my 8-year-old, I always try, and I have experience with an older child as well. I foster adopted an older kid, and he is older. How old is he now? I want to say he's 28. No.
Oh, wow. I didn't notice. When was this?
My husband and we got married in 2005, and we couldn't have children. So about 5 years into our marriage, we decided we wanted to be foster adoptive parents. So we went through social services in our local county, and we adopted a teenager. And I was only 25.
Right.
So he was 13 and I was 25. But so I have experience with an older kid as well, and honesty issues that came along with that, which there were many.
Right.
But so this time when I have my little ones, my 8-year-old, if he comes to me and he tells me the truth about something he's lied about, I am like 95% more lenient,
right,
than I am when, I catch him in a lie. I try so hard not to have to consequence him if he has come to me and told me the truth about something. If it's something bad that he's done, whatever the case may be, I'm always more lenient if he's being honest, because I want to encourage and foster that honesty,
Right.
And I think that's hard because like sometimes they do things and it is not.
Yeah.
But I definitely, I learned some lessons from fostering the teenage and adopting a teenager that I learned a lot going into
Yeah.
going into
Yeah.
having my other kids that I tried to do differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And this gets us to another thing I wanted to ask you about, that I wanted to ask you about homeschooling and kind of what made you want to homeschool your children? You know, were you homeschooled? When did this start, and how do you do this?
Okay. So I decided to homeschool my kids because that's a deep question. I don't want to get political or anything either.
You
But
can if you want, but yeah, it's up to you
no,
entirely.
no,
But
no, no, no,
yeah,
no, 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 no. I should not. Um, but I wanted to homeschool my kids because I wanted to teach them. I wanted to really be the one to teach them. Um, and my teenager was in school and he was in the public school system. I was in the public school system growing up. And I did not have a good experience myself. My husband didn't have a good experience growing up in the school system. And we just wanted to spend more time with our kids and wanted to be more in control, I guess,
yeah,
of what they're learning. I hate to say it like that. But it's true. I want to be more in control. I want to make sure we can talk about Jesus in school,
right,
at home, but they can't talk about it in public school. And that's important to me that we can actually, because he's a big part of our life. I mean, I have a very strong faith and that's super important that I teach my kids that to me, that I show them what brings me happiness, that I know that it can bring them happiness, right? So I want to share it with them. And that was part of the reason that I wanted to homeschool. It's because we start each day with a prayer when we
right,
do school. And we say the Pledge of Allegiance in school. And I don't know if they do that at all public schools anymore. And we, not only that too, I get to spend more one-on-one time with my kids when I'm teaching them. So I'm not trying to brag. My kids are a lot more advanced because they get that attention from me. My 8-year-old was reading when he entered kindergarten.
right,
So in preschool, I taught him how to read. And I'm doing the same with my 4-year-old daughter right now. I'm teaching her to read in preschool. Things that if they're ready for it, then you can teach it to them. And every kid is different. I've learned so much since I started homeschooling, that one kid can be really good at something when they're 4. And like my daughter, she writes great. Like her handwriting is fantastic. She can trace lines. But my older son, when he was that age, he really could not trace lines very well. And it was more squiggly and his handwriting was a lot worse. But he picked up reading faster than her. We're having to go a little slower with my daughter than we did with him. But everyone learns at a different pace. And my kids, since I have them at home and I'm homeschooling, we can learn at their pace when they're ready. So since my daughter's good at drawing and sketching things and writing out, I'm trying to get her handwriting down and focusing harder on her handwriting at this age than I am on. We're still doing reading. She knows the sounds of the letters, but she struggles putting the words together. But anyway, yeah, dude, that's the beauty of homeschooling. I love it. I absolutely love it. I've never done anything more rewarding. It's really cool to watch, to teach your kids something, to sit and like spend the time with them, and really, like, it's a lot of work to teach them how to read, and you put the effort in and then they're reading and it's like so cool to see your kid like, oh, they get it. And now my son reads books in his room, and it is so rewarding every time. He's like, oh, he's reading the Boxcar Children right now.
Right. Yeah. It's a big one. Yeah.
And he tells me about it. It's so cool. I love it. I absolutely love homeschooling. Our school is the Delaney Academy for Gifted Children. That's our, anyway.
Right. Yeah. Well,
It's
I wanted
fun.
to ask you about it because I think it's become such a topic in recent years too. Like it's become, and I know you did this many years ago before it was probably even like a cultural topic and all of that, where
Yeah.
like there's like this big battle in the schools. And I'm somebody who I went to grad school to be a teacher at a college level, not so much K through 12, but like I've seen too much kind of stuff. Like I've seen what
Yeah.
actually like the curriculums, the pedagogy, what it's based on. A lot of it's based on nothing. It's just a hobby horse somebody has. There's really no evidence. Like, you know, the debate about phonics and stuff. We spent 30 years ruining a generation of children, ruining a generation of children's ability to read by doing this half-baked, you know, evidence-free, whole word guessing reading style that is everywhere in K through 12 now, is everywhere, particularly in the K through 5, which is the most important part. And I mean, it's definitely something, and I live in an area, the school districts are terrible. So my wife and I, at the very least, think about, and again, this is a few years down the road here. Now my daughter's very young,
Right.
still an infant, but like we like, well, we have to be able to either afford the private schools around here, or like, yeah, I'm going to have to supplement seriously. Like I already have a curriculum, like I can teach her to start the teacher to read at the age of 2. The brain can start to pick that up 2 to 4, and you can start getting them through that, and just the phonics, you know, nothing more than that.
Mhm.
And she will be able to read by the time she goes into kindergarten, you know, much more advanced than everybody else. And it just, there is something like, so I would know, I was just curious about it, and like, yeah, what motivated that, and you kind of, but you also help others kind of get started with this too, right? Like what would you say is so difficult about starting, right? You said it's a lot of work, the time that it takes, but even it's less than a school day usually, right? To do most homeschooling, because you have a few kids, you get through the lessons, and it's like an hour or two, and you're like, okay, like, you know, you don't have to have the babysitting aspect.
We get to go be social.
Right.
That's what I like to point out to people, because a lot of people will say, oh, what about the socialization, keeping them at home? It's like, no, we get to go be social more, because our school usually only takes, well, my son's 3rd grade now, so his is like 2.5 hours.
Right.
But out of the whole day, I've pointed out the kids get on the school bus at 7 on our street, right? And they get home at like 3:30, and I'm like, he just wakes up at 7 and comes downstairs. I'm like, look, they're getting on the bus.
Right.
And he gets to sit and eat breakfast and relax. And then we get ready and we do school around 9, and it goes to about 11 or 11:30, and then we have lunch, and then we have a play date. Like,
Right.
we have a lot of other homeschool friends. So we go on play dates almost every single day. So he gets to socialize, and not with people that are only his age,
Yeah.
which is what the public school system and school systems do. 8-year-olds play with 8-year-olds.
Right.
8-year-olds playing with 10-year-olds would be like crazy, but we do that all the time. And our homeschool kids, we like to, me and my friends, we like to kind of brag that our kids aren't afraid of adults.
Right.
They'll talk to grown-ups, whereas like when you grow up and you go to the school system, you shy away from grown-ups. They get you in trouble.
Right.
Like, but
Because
our
they
kids
have to discipline
totally
100
fine.
kids. Yeah, there's 100 kids that they have to discipline with behavior and stuff. So things
Yeah,
can't
it's a lot
slide, and yeah,
easier. Right. It's easier than you think to start. I would say homeschooling even could start like at 2, like you said, with reading and stuff. I introduced Leapfrog, these little Leapfrog cartoons that are, I highly recommend them to just about everybody that has little kids in general, but especially if you're going to homeschool, because the Leapfrog videos, like there's the Phonics Farm, and they sing little songs about A makes the ass sound.
right.
And my son, my 8-year-old, when he was 2, would sing that song. When he was only 2, he knew all the sounds of the letters already.
Right.
And Leapfrog also has counting, so he knew from that the counting. He's a visual learner. I use whatever I can to get him to learn. But it's way easier than you think. Like you said, it's only like, I mean, preschool is maybe 30 minutes.
Right.
Like, uh, and it's play. Like we play, we talk about the sounds of the letters. I have so many like supplements that I use to teach her. I'll use, there's different toys that you can get that are like identify the letter and jump on the letter. And there's like a math mat that she jumps on the letter or the number. And then she also has a sight word little thing that's like, it'll say, what does the word can start with? And she has to pick the C.
Right.
So she sounds it out. But there's like so much that you can supplement that they can't or don't use in school because they can't, because there's like 25 kids in a classroom.
Right.
Or 20 kids or whatever. And they just get so much more attention from me than they would if they went into a school. So they get to be more advanced.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I mean,
it's fun though.
This whole debate, I feel like it really kicked. I mean, obviously, it's always been something that's happened. The people that are homeschooled versus the public school or private school system or the charter school system. This all gets kind of thrown into it with the kind of schooling. But I think COVID really opened a lot of people's eyes to what's actually happening in these schools when parents had to sit down and teach their children the lessons, and they were seeing what the lessons were, or they were seeing kind of, you know, the new math stuff that everybody does. Again, like I've kind of seen
the
behind
Common
the
Core stuff, right?
Yeah.
There was a big controversy. Yeah.
And that's been raging since the 90s. I mean, like there's I've, again, being kind of in grad school, when you go to grad school for certain subjects and stuff, like you get the pedagogy in these fields, and it all comes from higher ed that trickles down into K through 12. And it really is kind of mind blowing. Like nothing is measured, nothing is actually studied in terms of outcomes, you know, what actually improves outcomes in terms of students learning to read and write and do arithmetic at grade level. Like nothing like that is ever studied. It's really just kind of made up as we go along. And it's kind of, we've gotten to a point where, I mean, yeah, I just think it's just crazy that I just hear more people talking about it. So I was just curious about it. Yeah. And,
it's a passion of mine. I'm so glad I homeschool. I have never regretted it ever since I started. And by the way, if you are interested in doing it, there's so many curriculums that are like turnkey, ready to go, very easy to use with kids. I use the Good and the Beautiful, but there's tons of different curriculums out there. Horizons is another, for math in particular. I used that with the oldest when he was like really young. He's very good at math.
Right.
So there's so many resources though to homeschool now. If it's possible and parents are like even home for a couple hours, like you can do it. Like
yeah. And it is kind of, yeah, I mean, it's, I mean, there's plenty of options out there, but I even think recently, like I was listening to an old radio show on Spotify from like the 90s, not even that old. And like there was, commercial for like a phonics thing, and I just remember thinking, you know, growing up in millennial, you'd see those Hooked on Phonics commercials with Alex Trebek or whatever, like kind of like supplemental to help your kid that was struggling, or even teach adults how to read. And it just, I don't see any of that. I don't see any commercials or ads for any type of phonics stuff. And if you go through like most schools' curriculums, like they don't even mention phonics in this. There's some that still do, obviously, but like it's just kind of, so seeing things like that makes me nervous. Seeing things like okay, like if we're not emphasizing like literally the proven, studied way to teach everybody how to read, it doesn't matter what level you're at. This is how you learn how to read.
We do use phonics in our home.
Yeah, we have to. Yeah.
We use phonics, but there are also some sight word stuff that I do with them, because there are some words. I've actually learned a lot homeschooling that I didn't realize when I was like in second grade and I was learning to read, just why you use a C sometimes or instead of a K and different words, and you know the rules behind like why when a Y is in the first syllable versus the second syllable or the
Right.
third syllable, things that I just kind of memorized when I was younger. I'm getting to like figure out, oh, that's why there's a Y. Or the Y is like, and the word try sounds like an I, a long I, versus at the end of Becky, it sounds like a long E, you know. Anyway, little things. You learn
Yeah.
fun little things I've learned in teaching him.
And that's a tough one. I know most kids struggle with the hard C. Yeah, that's a tough one to get your head around. And English is a tricky language too. Like
It is.
it's one of those because there's all these rules, and there's all these exceptions to the rules, and
Yeah.
there's all these circumstantial things, and it's like it's very if you don't know, you know, obviously if you've been raised in it, you're kind of like, oh, it makes sense. But like, no, like if you're learning a language or if you're learning as a foreign language, it can really throw you. So that's
Yeah,
fantastic.
I imagine it would be
Yeah.
hard to learn.
I wanted to, and we touched on this a little bit already, but I wanted to ask you about the theme of family and kind of it's a theme in books, it's a theme in, and I think about it in a couple different ways, right? The kind of, I think of like the novelist Jonathan Franzen, where he's always talks about family and he talks about using it as like a technique, whereas like if you're writing something and you put a family with like siblings and parents and all involved, it automatically sets up a dynamic. You know, you can use that dynamic to write, you know, adult drama, children drama, you know, whatever it is, like that it implies a dynamic already. So I think about it in terms of, and you can answer this however you feel, but like kind of the importance of family in writing and in life, and kind of, yeah, how it fits into story, narrative, or how it just kind of fits into your everyday life and philosophy and stuff like that. Like, you know, family's importance, its role, all of that as a theme, or again, broader. Yeah.
Sure. So Gnomes of Fibberton does not have like a family in it, right? Well, it kind of does. It touches on it's one child, and if they're born and they tell too many fibs, they get carried to Fibberton. My sequel book, The Tunnel of Truth, when I finally get it all written down, is going to be about redemption and how if you tell the truth, as difficult as that can be, because there's so many consequences,
Right.
or it seems that way for little kids especially, they tend to think that there are like, you never know what kinds of crazy consequences kids dream up, because I've heard some stuff. And my teenager, like he thought I was gonna just freak out when he told me the truth about things that I'm like, I don't even care you did that.
Right.
But anyway, lost my train of thought there for a second. That families and story, we were talking about the importance of families, right?
Yeah.
Families are so important to me, though, because that's so at the center of my faith. So what we believe as members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, we believe that the family is eternal and that we can be sealed together in the temple for all eternity. And when we have children, our children are sealed to us. And if our children get sealed to their spouse, we get sealed, and it's like a chain, you know? And so to us, to me, it's family is everything. If we love and support our families, we get to stay together forever. And that's like why I do everything, is so that I can stay with my family and be with them forever and just love them and be supportive of them and be happy together. So they really are kind of everything to me.
Yeah.
Family's super important.
Yeah, and I know we talked about it a little bit already, yeah, in terms of having parents you can go to, the kind of the family unit and things like that. And I know listeners will say, like, it sounds like some type of like crazy, you know, political talking point, or the family unit or something, but I'm like, it's much deeper. Like, and I think once you have children too, that really starts to click with you. A friend of mine has said this, like he said, like you don't even understand, you know, like kind of like the connection that the children give to not just you and your wife, or you and your husband, or, you know, like, you know, the person you're having children with, but to your parents, your grandparents. Like he was saying, his second daughter, he said, sometimes she'll look at me and she'll turn her head a certain way. And she's, you know, it's like 6 years old. And he said, I see my mother, you know, his mother is passed on now at this point. And he's like, and I see it. She looks exactly like my mother. And he's like, I didn't even realize this connection that I have now to my mother through my, second daughter here. And when he was telling me that, I was just thinking to myself, like, man, yeah, that is, you almost, not just do you see yourself and you see your significant other, but like, yeah, you see grandparents or parents or brothers and sisters, aunts and uncles, like you see these kind of the little bits of I guess, we call it DNA or whatever, but like the little bits of that person come through the kind of family dynamic here. Not just the genes, but more than that. Yeah, please.
Well, I was going to say genes wise. So it's fun to do. If you've ever have you done 23andMe or your ancestry at all?
I haven't, but my wife really enjoys that. She does it all the time.
So maybe it's a woman thing, because I am more into it than my husband. But so I did our 23andMe, and my father was in the system from like when he did it. I think we got him to do it like a decade ago, and then I have grandparents on the other side in there. But I got my kids' DNA and I sent it in. And my boys, because I have my oldest I have boy, girl, boy. So the 1-year-old is a boy also, but they both have red hair and blue eyes like mommy. And dad has brown hair and brown eyes. And my little girl has like brown hair and like hazel eyes. But the really interesting part, my youngest boy, who he just got his DNA back a couple weeks ago, shows that he is, and this is really unusual for DNA, it's usually 25% per grandparent, right? And 50% per parent. He has 33% in common with my father, who also had red hair and blue eyes. So it's cool to see. He looks like my dad, and it actually shows in his DNA. It's kind of neat to see that familial resemblance.
Yeah,
I'm obsessed with family, and I am. It's a topic that gets me excited.
Of course, yeah, and it is such a. It's, I remember we had a cousin that he didn't. We all kind of looked similar. We had a look to us, right? Like me and my cousins and stuff, but the youngest one of my cousins, he didn't quite look like everybody else, right? Like he had a kind of a different, like, facial features and stuff like that. And we were like, oh, who does he look like? And I remember when one of our great aunts died, and there were, we were cleaning out the house and stuff, and there were these pictures that my father was, I want to keep this, because they were of his grandmother and stuff, and of his grandfather. And it's like, he looks exactly like my youngest cousin. Like, kind of, he looked like,
that's cool.
He looked just like him, like almost like a spitting image, kind of right in front of like this portrait from his wedding, when he was young in his 20s. And we were just like, oh, that's who he looks like. Like, oh, he looks just like, and it was like a few generations, but still like it came through, and it was kind of, like it does kind of keep it alive, keeps this.
Yeah, it's cool to feel connected to our ancestors, and that's part of. I mean, that's part of our my belief system too. In our church, like we believe we're connected, not just like my family will be connected to my kids' families, but I'm connected to my parents and to their grandparents, great grandparents, and so on and so forth. So it's really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I wanted to ask you about creativity, and it's one of those things that people always ask, like, can it be taught? And I would ask you, like, can it be taught, or like, how do you use creativity to inspire kind of young minds, all of that,
I don't think creativity can be. I kind of feel like that's inherent. Like, you're either a creative person or you're not.
Right.
With that said, creativity is so important when teaching kids. I have seen, like, when I read this story, the reviews we've gotten are so cute and so funny from the different kids. Like, their little creativity just go wild when they hear the story and they think of like little gnomes following them. I had one of my nieces told me, she was like, I'll just kick them. She's like, if they come near me, I'll just kick them. And I was like, you lying a lot? Is that why you're thinking about kicking the gnomes? But to go to the point that, like, they're not very scary, because my niece thinks, oh, I'll just kick them, right? I got another review from someone that it was like a grandparent that read it to a 5 and 6 year old girl, And she was like, oh, she just started confessing, like at the end of the book. Like they were like just prattling off all these confessions. And then another one that I thought was really funny was somebody read it to his niece and nephew, and the niece looked over at, their brother and sister talking, and she's like, so in the book, right, gnomes of Fibberton have to do a lot of chores in Fibberton because that's the life of misery and woe, is doing chores at home, right? And she looked over at her brother and she was like, Mommy must have lied a lot when she was, she does a lot of chores now.
Right.
It's just funny to see their creativity and how they react to the story. I love that. I absolutely love seeing little kids play pretend. Is one of my favorite things.
And it's
so
I like that dynamic with children too, because I think it's something that you do see kind of naturally. Like we get kind of, I had another children's author on, and I was asking her about kind of the creative, do we lose something as we age, that kind of creative edge kind of, and a good writer or something will bring that out, kind of child, we always call it childish, like it's always referred to culturally as, oh, be a little silly, be creative, right? Like then that would be kind of associated with like children's games or something. But that's how you write a book, like that's how you come up with an idea. Like it's at any level too. So it's always just fascinating to me. And Stephen King always has that saying where he just says, he's like, it can be learned, it can't be taught. It has to be learned through practically doing things, like doing things and like every day kind of being creative in that. Like you can't just sit down and give somebody a lesson and be, oh, this is what you do, like it kind of,
right.
And that's another thing that is like deeply within just different people, like kind of you find it within. So this is just a constant theme on the podcast. We like to ask writers that come on what they think of this. And yeah, I'm just constantly fascinated.
Yeah, you can get your creativity going. That one of the things that does get my creativity going is playing D&D.
Oh, okay, yeah.
I've played Dungeons and Dragons for about 20 years. Yeah. So that is one of the things that gets my creativity going is when I sit down and play D&D with old friends, and we sit there for hours.
Right. And it gives you a structure to kind of go crazy in. So it's like you can do whatever you want, but then there's still this structure of like the world and the game on top of it. And like that's an interesting dynamic too. And I didn't plan on asking you about this, but the kind of the creativity can be limitless, but when it's limitless, it almost becomes meaningless. Like you have no direction to go to. But when you have just the slightest parameters, so like a D&D game, now it's channeled, and it can kind of be channeled and get even, grow into this huge thing. And yeah, that's
a really good point. Yeah, I never thought of that. That's a really good point. That sometimes when you're trying to sit down and you're like, okay, I need to come up with an idea. Right. Like I'm struggling. I need to write this next book. I got to do it, But if I sit down and play D&D, like I am the paladin that I was, the last week, and I am, going to save the day and whatever. And I have those parameters, those that make it easy for my creativity to just start flowing. And
right.
Yeah, that's a really valid point. I never thought of that before. Yeah. That may help me in trying to actually get the words down for the next book.
Yeah, please. I was going to ask you if it was going to be like a series of books too, because when I was looking it up, it seems like you were planning the next book, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I have ideas for 5 different books total.
Oh, fantastic. Yeah.
So The Gnomes of Fibberton's the first one, The Tunnel of Truth, where they have to accept the consequences and tell the truth. They can go through the tunnel. The gnomes can go through the tunnel of truth and go back and be with their families. And then I have loose ideas for Too Many Tall Tales, the girl who goes to Fibberton because she tells too many tall tales. Like she says she found buried treasure. She says she can lift a car over her head, kind of things. Then the boy who didn't do it. So the oldest lie in the book. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it. Right. And the book's about him. But then the other book that I feel really passionate about and I'm excited for is Santa's Other Helpers.
Oh, I love a Christmas theme. Yeah.
Yes. But these elves deal strictly with the naughty department, right? These are our gnomes. I said elves. I didn't mean to say elves. Our gnomes, because my gnomes have been criticized for looking like elves.
Really?
Because I have an Indian author. He's from India, and he drew the gnomes. I loved how he drew them without beards and without hats. They just have pointy ears and pointy noses, and they kind of look a little like elves. But since no one's ever met an elf or a gnome, I figured I can call them whatever I want.
Yeah, exactly.
So anyway, Santa's other helpers are, so the gnomes of Fibberton deal with the naughty department. And they have the FIB, the Fib Investigation Bureau, right? So they're going to have jackets like kind of like another, organization, but FIB instead of the other way. And they'll have like the 10 most wanted fibbers up on the board, and they don't get to like wrap gifts and make presents and be nice, happy little elves. They have to do the naughty stuff. So anyway, that's what that book is going to be about, that I'm kind of passionate about. I'm excited to do that.
Yeah, I mean, again, love a Christmas theme here too, and that's something too. Like when I think of children's books that touched me, and that I still remember, and everybody has the Marie Sendak and kind of Where the Wild Things Are and stuff, but I remember the Polar Express. There were I had this one about a woodworking guy that makes a nativity scene, and I can't remember the name of it now, but I remember the story. They just like they were all kind of Christmas themed stuff that I really latched onto, and maybe that's just me and whatever, but I just.
No, did you ever read The Littlest Angel?
No, I don't remember that one.
Oh, that was one of my favorites. It was a Christmas story. A little boy dies when he's like very young. So he's like the only like 4 or 5-year-old in heaven with the other angels. And it's kind of sad, but it's like, I always cried, even when I was a kid.
Right.
Would cry, but I loved it because it was such a sweet story. He gave whatever he could to the baby Jesus when the baby was born. And all the other angels gave like big ornate, like golden gifts and all this stuff. And he gave like what he had. Yeah. And they were like, this is the best gift of all, kind of like the widow's mite in the Bible, right? Giving the best that you can means the most, right? But anyway.
I mean that's it goes into those morality tales too, with kind of the importance of having that kind of.
I think I've always been drawn to probably morality tales since I'm just a subjective kind of, or objective person. I mean, objective.
Yeah. And then we are going to move on to the book now too. I know we've been talking all over the place with these things, but it's the fun of podcasting. Sure. But I wanted to self-publishing. Why did you choose to go this route, and kind of more than that, starting your own press? The incomprehensibly unimaginable consortium. Why did you start your own press, and what was that like?
It was difficult, but I am a business person, so it was. I mean, it wasn't. I don't know. It wasn't. I have a lot of experience. My husband and I started a tech company back in like 2010. So I know all aspects of like business administration and human resources and running payrolls and just everything. Because I had to do it when you start a company, you're everything, right? So I had to do all that stuff. So I've done it before. Been a few years, but I got to do it again. That was my motivation behind it, was so that we could actually get the profit from it.
Right.
Instead of someone investing in it and us having to give them profit. I wanted us to be able to get most of the profit that we could. Because I was looking at Amazon, I looked at Amazon publishing, and I wasn't crazy about that and how much they take. That seemed kind of wild. So anyway, through this process, though, I have gotten the book on Amazon, but it's not published by Amazon.
Right.
I have the books in their warehouses that I ship to them, which they made me cover the ISBNs.
Right.
on all of them
Yeah.
with an Amazon barcode, and that really kind of made me mad, because it shows on Amazon's website that legal ISBNs are an approved manufacturer barcode,
Right.
and they made me print out little labels and cover every single one of my books when I shipped them in. And I was mad about that, because when someone publishes through Amazon, they don't have to do that. They just ship it out. They print it and ship it out right on demand.
Right.
But I guess that's what their way of discouraging people from self-publishing.
Yeah.
Even though I don't know, I'd say I'm an indie publisher.
Yeah.
Right. Not just like a self-publisher, because I actually started a company, and
Right.
like, this is what because that's what I know how to do. I know how to start
Yeah.
companies. So I'm like, okay, so we have an LLC now, and this is, some of the adventurous things. So I went to Fiverr and
Right.
got my illustrator, right? I found an illustrator on Fiverr. I went through 3 different people before I finally found the illustrator we liked.
Right.
And who would stick with us too, because a lot of different talent on Fiverr kind of would disappear.
Yeah, it's very unreliable for long-term partnership. Yeah, very.
Right. So the guy we found was great, though. He's a great artist, and he's a hard worker, and he stuck with me through it. And I'm planning on using him for the other books too. He's very motivated. So it's fantastic. But he drew it out, and I got it all in a PDF, and I found a printing press, and Print Ninja is the name of the company that prints the books that I found. I got a quote for printing a bunch of books at one time, and I sent it off, and they print them in China, and they shipped them to me.
Right.
And I figured out how to get them in Amazon, and how to get on Walmart online and Facebook online.
Right.
You can even buy them on our Facebook shop. And then we also on Fibberton.com.
Yeah.
They're available on my website. So it's been a process.
Yeah.
And I also learned, as a children's author, by the way, this is different than how they treat novelists.
Oh, yeah.
When you go around as a children's author, you have to have like activities for
Right. Yeah.
Like, I can't just come read the book. I have to have like a bag of tricks for
Right.
children to do. So, but that's fine. I came up with some things, and we do like a gnome scavenger hunt when I come to libraries, and I have like pages from the book that are blank, like just sketches for the kids. They can color it in and become an artist. And then I also got a photo booth so they can dress up like a gnome and stuff. Adventures in becoming an author. These are things that I learned that I did not know. I was like, when they asked me to do like an hour of activities, I'm like, are you do you ask novelists that?
Right. Yeah.
but I have to. So anyway.
Yeah. I mean, we're fascinated by this too, because there's the publishing industry. It's obviously, we're writing a book podcast. We talk about it all the time, but we've had a lot of writers on that did KDP or some variation of that, or started their own presses. Kind of, it's. I don't want to say it's the Wild West, because there's still a lot of order to it. It's not like chaos, but it is kind of like the old guard, or the old institutions that would help you do those types of things are pretty much crumbling, and if not completely crumbling, they're not what they were. They're not what they were all those years ago, even 15 years ago. They're not even close to what they were in terms of helping you distribute and even helping you market. A lot of times you're not getting any marketing out of these big presses. So we're just we love having writers on that do it themselves like this too, and do all that work, because it's I mean, one, it's brutal, but two, it's also like kind of, you have ultimate control as an artist and creator, writer over that stuff. You don't have to deal with a team of lawyers talking about what can and can't go in certain sections or anything. And I mean, not that you have to deal with that too much, but I know, it just, the timeline you can control. You don't have to wait 4 years for each book or whatever to go through a process of publishing, and you get to pick the illustrator. You don't have to fight like with these through 3 different people at a press or something or publisher to they want you to use their illustrator or whatever it is, they don't want to pay for an illustrator. So
right. It's actually not that expensive if you use an illustrator that's out of the country. That like it's not. As a business person here, you don't pay taxes on out of the country expenses. There's no taxes. So you could save a lot of money using someone from a different country. Just saying. And there's a lot of really good artists that live. I found a lot of great artists in like Indonesia and India, and I have one in Venezuela that I work with, because I've in the middle of the book, I don't think I've even mentioned this. There's a song. I think I emailed it to you, but there's a song in the middle of the book, and I came up with this jingle. I found someone on Fiverr to sing it because I wanted it to be like in this deep, like crooner bass voice. That's what gnomes of Fibberton do. And then, anyway, I got the song, and then I used another illustrator who could do like an animation to make it a cartoon. So in the middle of the book, there's a QR code, and if you scan it, it pops up a music video, and it's a little sing-along. So it's one of the drawing points of the book. The kids like to sing a song. It gets them wanting to read.
And that's something that I think is important to point out, that you can only do that if you're doing your own kind of indie press route. Like they're not going to, you're not going to have a publisher help you do that unless you fight tooth and nail for it to happen. They're going to be like, why are we spending money on this? But it's like, no, you can do it yourself, and you can have these extra kind of things that are little fun extras, or even they're good marketing for your book and your series, the series that it's going to become. So.
Yeah, I'd say 95% of writing a book is marketing it.
Oh, yeah.
And I had no idea about that when I wrote it. I had no idea. But you learn it. You learn it fast. You find out, I've got to market and promote this. It doesn't just sell itself. Yeah. It really doesn't. You have to get the word out, and you have to be edgy and different. And yeah.
And we've had, you're the second children's author we've had on the podcast, but we've had a bunch of different writers, and fiction, nonfiction. There's medical research, these kind of like that are putting out their own books through their own press or through KDP or something. And it's kind of they did the same thing where like that's the reason I think the big 5 or the traditional presses, they're not even putting in the time, effort, and money to market it, because that is the most expensive, the most time-consuming thing. And that's really what you want those presses for, is to do that. So they're not even giving you that. We have a friend of mine and she was publishing an adult novel, like adult fiction. And she was saying the same thing. Like she got almost nothing in terms of marketing support for her book. Everything that she basically did herself. It was just very interesting. And this is the podcast where the listeners like to hear this too, like know how to. But the last couple of questions I have here, they're all kind of writing questions too. So we move into more of like the craft of it, right? We like to ask writers, what is your writing routine like? How do you like to do your writing? Are you a daily writer, sporadic, mornings, after the kids go to bed? When do you usually do your writing, and how do you kind of fit that into your life?
It's definitely sporadic for me, and it is whenever. Sometimes I will do it when the kids are around. It's just whenever it sporadically, randomly hits me, and I have to go write it down. And that is my routine. That's it. It's there's no like I sit down and try to do it. That would kill me. If I sat down and tried to force myself to write something once a day, my brain would just be like, no, we're not gonna. You have nothing now, right? Brick wall, totally. It's only when I have the idea, I gotta write it. When I get the idea, whether the kids are around or not, I have to try to write it down. I've tried to use voice to text sometimes, and the kids are around and they'll talk, and I have to like fix it.
Is that
But
your preferred method? Kind of just like jotting down in the notes app, voice to text, kind of when an idea
yeah,
strikes, just kind of like, and then you kind of assemble those at a later.
yes, yeah, that's how I always do it. I always jot myself my notes down. I usually actually email it to myself.
Oh, okay,
Um,
yeah, yeah,
and so I send a note to myself, but I do use a notes app too. I have a notes app too, but, or I'll even text myself sometimes
yeah.
some notes, or I'll even message my husband things, and I'll use that message. He'll be like, "What are you talking?" And he knows that I'm like having
Right.
ideas or something, and he just will ignore it. But whatever avenue I can on my phone, I'll
Yeah,
use
you
it to
have
save
to.
it.
Have to. But yeah, we love to ask everybody that and kind of how they kind of structure their stuff. Another one we like to ask every writer that comes on here, and we don't need anything specific, we don't need numbers or anything. How do you make a living? You know, it's tough out there for writers, especially people that are trying to be a writer for a living. You know, do you make any money off of the books? Do you have to have a day job? How do you make a living?
My husband works. My husband supports us
Right.
with his job, basically.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have made some money off of the books, but nothing. It's not. You can't live on that.
Right.
Can't live on that.
That seems to be a constant theme of every time we ask writers this question. Be like, you really can't live off the books. You know, we, we've had
It's a
people that
labor of love.
we've had people that have won Pen Awards, that have won National Book Awards, and they're all saying like, "Well, you have to have a day job."
I've
Like,
won a couple of awards now. Yeah, I've got a 2024 Literary Titan Book Award,
yeah,
first place, and a first place in the Firebird Book Award for children's fables. And yeah, I got a couple book awards, but
yeah, and it still doesn't
you
lead to
can't.
any money. Not enough.
No,
Yeah, yeah,
I mean it does. Yeah, it's we've done better than I think a lot
right,
do, and I go around to vendor events
right,
and sell books. I don't just use the internet. Oh my goodness, that would not. I go around to vendor events. I take pictures at the vendor events. I use it all as like promotional. And
right,
I sell way more books in person. Way
right,
more books in person. When I can talk to people and tell them about the book and tell the kids about the book, and they can see the video playing, because I'll have like the video playing that's in the book, and that usually gets the kids. They see the video and they're like, "There's a cartoon in your book? Yeah, I
right.
want it," and they'll get their parents to buy it for them.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean we had the other children's author we had on here. Go listen to that episode, listeners. It was she said the same thing, where she's said she gets more sales going to the individual bookstores and libraries in, you know, a 50-mile radius of her home
Yeah.
or longer, and then relying on Katie or Amazon sales or Barnes and Noble sales or anything like that. Like, you really do have to do that extra mile, no matter what it is. Yeah. Children's books, adults, you know, fiction books. I mean, my background is poetry books. I mean, nobody's buying those no matter what you do. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the reason we ask this question is because we like to dissolve the illusion that people have that, oh, like these writers are making all this money and you can just do it for a living or whatever. No, you know, like that's not what's happening out there. Like the industry is struggling. People aren't buying as many books, and you have to do this kind of DIY, have some type of other income. You know, you're not going to be able to make a living off of it. But yeah, I love that you're out there making money and making sales with it too. Like, that's fantastic.
I actually saw on your podcast. I went and looked at your podcast yesterday, and today I was looking at that page. What is it called? It starts with an S. The name, I don't know. It's the name where all your podcasts are. What's the website or something? Never mind.
Sorry, there's a
I
red
don't know.
circle.
Oh no, maybe it's something different. I saw it on something that started with an S. I don't know.
It's
It wasn't-
on all of the podcast players and stuff. So it's
Oh, is that
Spotify
right?
or iTunes or, you know, whatever. Yeah, it
It
should
was
give
some
you.
random one of them. Anyway, I saw the podcast that you did that was about that article that was released September 2024.
Oh,
And I had read that. I read that same article.
yes, it went viral.
So I
Yeah,
was listening to you. I'm like, yeah, this is all the same stuff that like we actually got our shipment of books in September 2024.
right. Yeah,
Like I had already ordered them. And like July, I think was when the order, or June, late June maybe, when the order went out to get all the books, and then that article came out like when the books arrived. I'm like, oh, this is encouraging.
yeah, yeah. That the poor girl, she got dragged for that too, for like just basically stating what is fact. I mean, people were very angry that she was saying, publishing might be a lost cause unless you're willing to do all this other work yourself, having to do all this other stuff, have an internet presence. Even in that article was great. Yeah. I mean, I appreciate that you went and listened to that too, because that was fun to go into. Whenever something big like that happens, I try to cover it, but it's not always covering all the current event stuff, but yeah, like it just, when I have the time and all that, I'll like, or if it was a big enough deal, I'm like, yeah, let's talk about this, because a lot of people are taking the wrong thing from this, and I need to correct the record. That's how I feel about it, right? Like,
Yeah.
But what
Anyway, that's a little discouraging, but
please,
whatever. Onward. It actually provoked me to start like really putting a lot more effort into our social media presence and everything. And I started really you have to, even to get your social media presence up, you have to put money into it.
Yeah.
You have to. There is no organic growth on social media anymore.
It's all pay to play. Yeah.
It's all pay. You got to pay to get followers and everything. So I got us up to a certain amount of followers by putting money in. And I'm like, you know what? I think this is enough. We'll see if I eventually put more money into it,
Right.
But yeah.
And there's always, that's interesting too, because there's always questionable returns on those too. If you're doing meta ads or something like that, like you're getting kind of, they'll get to, we can guarantee this many people will see it. YouTube does this too, and all that kind of like, we'll guarantee this many people will see it. But like, how many of those are real? How many of those are bots? How many of those people are actually targeted by their algorithms for the marketing? Like, you'd love this thing too, It's crazy. I mean, you can spend a lot of money and not get a lot of return for that too. You have to be careful, like with that too. Yeah, they will screw you.
I think I figured out at the end there how to get. I was like, I think I just want to get a lot of followers, because I want to make it look like there's a big. And we have, I have like 3,000 followers. I went to 3,000 followers pretty quickly.
Yeah.
Once I figured out how to get, how to do the ads so that you're doing it for people to follow you. And I was like, okay, I'm done with this for now. I'm moving on, because it can be a money sink. It can cost a lot of money.
That, and then you always get pegged in these, I get pegged as this kind of like crazy kind of like right wing or like new right kind of podcast or something, which I reject when people label me with that. I'm just like, no. But then as soon as I start defending the canon or something from the people that are trying to destroy it, there's this kind of uneasiness in the literary world around that. We're like, you can't, like, you're violating some rule or something, that like we have to pretend that the Western canon was just arbitrary and nobody had any thought when they made it or anything like that. And I'm like, okay, wow, you guys are lying. But yeah. So there's all that. So, but again, feel free. I feel free to. This is a podcast where I like everybody to feel free to just express themselves here. There's no judgment or consequences for any opinion that's stated.
There's an echo chamber.
Yeah, at least not here.
There's an echo chamber on the internet that you have to just watch out for.
Exactly.
That's all I'll say on that issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. And the last couple.
You're not alone.
Yes. Yeah. What advice would you give to any writers out there that are just trying to start out, maybe trying to do something like this on their own?
Ooh. The advice I would get, I'm discouraging. I'm already discouraging. The advice I would give is if you really want to write a book, and go ahead and write it and get it all out and do that. But know that if you want to be successful with it, it's really about 95% marketing and promotion. It's not 5% of it's writing the book, and then everything else is you gotta have drive and motivation to promote it and market it and try to sell yourself and sell the book. And that's not always a very easy thing to do. Not all of us are, what's the word? I don't know. We're not all politicians, right?
Yeah. You have to play, it isn't necessarily like kind of politics in the traditional way. You have to play that kind of office politics kind of game, where it's not just about the political side or like the, right, left. It's more like kind of the social politics, the kind of everyday marketing politics, office politics.
Yeah. And I think there's a certain level of you have to sell yourself, that's kind of a politician's thing to do. They have to sell themselves to everybody, and you have to like, as much as I like try, I'm not great at it.
Yeah.
Because I'm not I don't want to call, I'm not a narcissist. It's really hard. I feel like almost all politicians, you got to have some narcissism in order to be like, yeah, I'm better than everyone else at this. Pick me. Right? And that's kind of what it is when you're an author and you're trying to sell your book. There has to be a level of, no, really, my book's the best. You have to buy my book. It's great. You got to buy it. It's awesome. And it's,
I think there is an instinctual thing too, right there, like kind of the right versus wrong. It feels almost wrong to put yourself in that thing. So a lot of writers kind of,
sorry.
No worries. We love having little everyday life coming into this. It's like I said, it's ambiance. It makes people relate to it more with when they have, everybody's got stuff going on. And I know we're bumping up against time, but yeah, that's it's fantastic. That's what's happening. But I think, like kind of selling yourself, most writers struggle with that. Like it's something that most writers,
not fun.
And then we're all put in this position now that if you're trying to publish something, anything, any type of book you're putting out there, listeners, poetry, nonfiction, children's literature, like any of this stuff, like you have to promote yourself. And it almost feels like the total opposite, because it's like this introverted thing you do on your own, and
you
then
write
you
alone,
share to the world. And it's so, we always love to ask every writer, like, how they deal with that. And the final question we like to ask writers here is, what are you working on now? What's taking up your time in terms of your creative energy and things like that?
I'm at a fork in the road. I'm having a hard time deciding which book I really want to put my energy in.
Right.
If it should be, because I have a series, right? And I have 2 books in front of me. I have The Tunnel of Truth and I have Santa's Other Helpers. And I really, really like Santa's Other Helpers.
Yeah.
And I kind of just want to go and do that one. But I feel like The Tunnel of Truth is really the sequel, and it should probably come out next. So I'm kind of, that has been like baffling me, and I need to stop and focus and just pick one and do it. But that is where I am at creatively right now. I have actually already written part of The Tunnel of Truth, like half of it, and have sketches for the pages and everything. But I'm just struggling getting the rest of it, because Santa's Other Helpers came into my mind, and it was just so fun. And like, I like the idea so much that it's hard to refocus.
Yeah. I'm big proponent of working on multiple things at once. Yeah. Like it kind of, if you have to write this one to get to the sequel, why not? Like, I mean, I guess especially when you own the press, nobody can tell you that you're behind on your deadline or something,
right?
So why not?
I do not have an arbitrary deadline. I could do it whenever I want. So.
Indulge whatever the creativity is kind of leading you to. But yeah, that's fantastic. I know we're bumping up against time here. Do you have time for like another 15, 20 minutes?
Sure.
You do? Okay, perfect.
Sure.
Perfect. Yeah. Becky, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much. Where can people find you? Where can people find your stuff?
So we are on Facebook. The Gnomes of Hibberton is on Facebook. The Gnomes of Hibberton is on Instagram, and it is on TikTok, and it's on X. We're on YouTube. And I also have a website, fibberton.com.
That's fantastic. And that's all linked below as well, listeners, so go check that out. Becky, please come back. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I will. So when I write that next book,
Yeah,
I'll be back.
please. Yeah.
Heavy.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
I may say that the male is entirely hostile. No! Inner
Resources.
life, friends, is boring. We must not say so. Are you radioactive now?
Inner.
Resources, American resources.
Being bored?
Some activities are intentional, right?
It shows such a lack
Heavy.
of gratitude for life. Bored. I aspire to boredom,
Heavy.
I should say.
Bored.
Heavy.
I am heavy.
Bored.
Has you the night sweats and the day sweats, pal? Pal, I do.